Hi, happy Victober! I am wearing my Victober t-shirt that was designed by Kate Howe. You can order it on Bonfire, I will leave a link down below. And it says Victober! As it is the 1st of October, we are celebrating with some reading sprints. Katie is hosting one in a few hours and I'm hosting one at night. But I did start 3 days early with my October reading. My first book that I've started reading is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I visited the Charles Dickens Museum, which you can find in the video before this. So I was in a Dickens mood and I decided to start with my Dickens. I am currently 150 pages in. If I want to finish my Victober TBR for this year, I will have to read 100 pages a day. So I'm happy I got already 150 pages in case I have a very slow day or two. The writing in this book is gorgeous. I'm really enjoying it. I think this is one of the first Dickens where I am so able to pay enough attention that I actually know what is going on constantly. There are a lot of characters in this book, which is always so confusing in every Dickens novel I've read so far, where I just feel overwhelmed with the amount of characters. So I've been making some annotations. Anytime I meet a new character, I've made a little tab so that I actually know who's all introduced and how they are related to everyone. So sometimes I look back a little bit and I'm like, oh yes, that's that character and they're that cousin or that brother or that daughter relation. I would say major themes in this book is so far socialist politics, which of course I was expecting because this takes place part in France a few years before the French Revolution. There's a French character in this book that is, there's a lot of mystery surrounding him, so I'm not really gonna talk about him, but he is definitely related to the gentry, but I think he is gonna be pro-revolution. And then we have people who are both French and English. We have a daughter and her father. Yes, I can take A Tale of Two Cities very literally so far. The other major theme is, I think, parentage, whether that's like biological parentage or by whom you've been raised or whom you're related to, who is a father or father figure so far. That's another big theme in this book that I'm really enjoying. There's of course one female character in this book that, what has she done? She has cried, she has fainted, she has knelt down before a man in overwhelm of emotions, and then she is Victorian virtue itself in that she doesn't need much and she makes do with what she has, but in a way that's like super honorable, and that's not really, I think I made an annotation, is she actually going to become a person in this book? Dickens women are, yeah, let's just keep a silence there. I'm holding out hope for this female character because I know people say that Dickens' later female characters are generally better written, especially the female characters that I really enjoyed that he wrote from our mutual friends. And this is also a later book. But generally, I'm having a great time with this book. It feels adventurous. I love the opening of the book where we were traveling. I always kind of love when a book opens with characters traveling, especially when it's like not, in this book it's not the main character, but he goes towards the main character. I think Dracula has a similar opening where it is the main character. I think the setup of a book like that is really, really good. And then I'm also reading some Victorian related books. So I'm reading How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman. I think I got about an hour and a half in. I have the audiobook, and just takes you through a day of a Victorian, whether they're rich, poor. I think we see kind of all sides of it. So far it's entertaining, it's fun, but it's not yet anything special. I'm afraid this might be a slightly boring reading experience, but with hopefully a lot of new information. And then I'm listening to an historical fiction called Nightingale about the last years of Florence Nightingale's life. I thought this was Victorian because you say Florence Nightingale and you think Victorian. I think they were born, they died around the same time, but Florence Nightingale is 90 in this book, so she's definitely a bit older than Queen Victoria was. And so its current day is 1910, but we do get flashbacks that are set in the Victorian period. I don't know if you can call this a Victorian historical fiction, but so far I am enjoying it. So I am going to start the first day of October with the first 2 chapters of Hester by Margaret Oliphant, of course. And then I will continue in A Tale of Two Cities. And I have only the ebook for Hester, so I'm not sure how many pages it is exactly, but I'm guessing chapters are as big as a general Victorian chapter, so I would say around 10, maybe 15 pages. I'm going to count 2 chapters as 20 pages every day. And then I need to read 80 pages of another book. The goal is to read 80 pages of Tale of Two Cities. I need to get to page 230 in this book, around halfway through. If my planning goes well, I'll finish this in a few days. And I will see you tomorrow. Decided to make my own candles again, which I really enjoy, but I'm always looking for a good company to buy the wax from, and I saw this small business, and I think they actually sell wax and scents and everything candle related for other businesses. You didn't need to be a business to order, so I thought, all right, good prices, let's do this. Might have made a tiny mistake because I thought 2.5 kilos. That's not that much. Like, I wanted a coconut soy wax. I didn't get flakes. I'll show you. I got a giant block of wax. How am I going to use this? I don't know. I hope I can cut through it, that it's soft enough. But I did get 2 very lovely scents. There's a pumpkin buttercream, a cinnamon, can you see? Oh, a cinnamon vanilla. So I am very excited about those scents. I love scented candles, but boy is a bit sensitive to that. So it's helpful to make my own, so I can just add the tiniest bit. So I might do that today. Just make the 2 candles and see how I'm gonna tackle that wax. Oh my gosh, I don't know. So the first one is this vanilla cinnamon. Looked at the website and I'm supposed to use like a half of this little flask per candle, but I feel like it's gonna be way too much. I'll use a 1/4. This one is really nice. Cinnamon, but like light and sweet. Right, and then we have the buttercream pumpkin. I like this one a little bit less, but it's like a pumpkin pie basically. So I think I'll use a 1/4. The scents, and like I've made lots of candles before, but I have this and I'll pour enough for 1 candle into this, add the scent and then add the candle in. I'm not adding the scent to the pan at all. Most of it is melted now, but I try to use as low a heat as possible for the candles. I haven't actually looked up how Victorians used to make their candles, but I definitely don't think they would pour candles in glass. I think they would do it that you have a wick that you would dip in candle wax, but they would use either like beeswax was the most luxurious one, which I think still is the most luxurious wax to use. I just hate the smell of it, to be honest, and so I never use beeswax. Coconut and soy is probably much better for the environment. Well, at least beeswax is used with bees, so it's not vegan, but or they used to use like animal fat. I think the cheaper varieties, I think most people use animal fat for their candles. Tallow, I think it was called, right? I will have a little research on how Victorians used candles, because I think in the late Victorian period you started to see the use of gas more, which of course was a much handier and brighter way to light your home. But I think definitely the early Victorians and the poorer Victorians as well maybe also used oil. Ooh, like, you know, I want to know these things because I think whale oil was like big as well in the mid-Victorian period to light the street lights. Let's dive into a little history on Victorian lighting and candles. I have no idea if they use scented candles. I don't think so. Would they? I mean, beeswax is scented, kind of. It's a much better scent than tallow. Yes, my wax is almost melted. So while I wait for my mix to get melted, I'll dive into some history and we'll talk a little bit about Victorians and candles. Trying to find out how far off I was with my guesses, I started with Ruth Goodman. In their book How to Be a Victorian, there is the specific chapter on lighting, but there is mention of gas lighting and later electric lighting being first used in pubs and train stations, which I found quite fascinating to know. Just before the Victorian period, candles were industrialized and they could be mass produced. Waxes used both in beauty products and in candles were often from all sorts of places. You have beeswax, tallow, and spermaceti. I think I pronounced that right. Spermaceti is made from whale oil and was the best, especially in warm weather, but the ethics aren't that great looking back. Beeswax was definitely more expensive, but better than tallow, which was the cheaper option. Paraffin, which is the cheapest and most used wax nowadays, wasn't popular until a bit later. Paraffin also gave a boost to oil lamps, which were used a lot between 1815 and the 1880s. Gaslighting became a bit more popular in the 1860s, but it was often thought to be dangerous and not well trusted. By 1819 though, they started to become mass produced and candles were mostly used in places where there was no gas lighting. Only at the end of the Victorian period did people start to consider electric lighting. When it comes to scented candles, it seems they were mostly used for health benefits in the midst of other wacky Victorian wellness things, using rose and lavender scent. I had a wonderful time hosting some sprints yesterday, hosting with Ross, which I'd never done for the first time, and Ross is a lovely person. I had a great time chatting with her about Victorian literature because she knows so much more about Victorian literature than I do. I saw a lot of new names in the chat as well. Thank you for anyone who joined us. I'm glad you enjoyed the games, which was a hit apparently. So I've made some more games for next week's reading sprints, which you can click on the little tab live and then you can see anything that is planned so far. During the sprints yesterday I read more of A Tale of Two Cities, which I'm still enjoying so much. I feel like the amount of characters for Dickens is like not that complicated, but it is complicated enough that it's not like a normal novel. Like usually it's much easier. You have like 4, maybe 5 characters that you should really know, but like Dickens has a minimum of 10, which is fine. I'm really enjoying it. The writing is so beautiful. There are like these beautiful, I would almost want to say purple prose sentences that last like half a page and they're so beautiful. I think there's a lot of guesswork you can do as well because this book is set a few years before the French Revolution. We follow some characters who are definitely going to be confronted or will have an opinion on that. I also enjoy the different layers of society, which I think is something Dickens always does. Connected to the French Revolution, it's extra interesting. Of course, I do sometimes forget that this is set earlier than the Victorian era because the writing feels so Victorian. I imagine these characters looking Victorian, but then it is very clear that Dickens uses a few characters to over-exaggerate what the past was like, and I kind of do enjoy that, but there are some characters where I'm like, oh yes, this is very Marie Antoinette, and then some other characters feel a little bit more contemporary Victorian. So it's interesting to read historical fiction from a historical perspective, but I do have to remind myself that it's not Victorian, which just means their dress is different, but because I'm such a visual reader, it's very important that I do get it. Otherwise, it feels just kind of off to me. And then, of course, I started reading Hester. Yesterday, I read 2 chapters on my Kindle. This morning, I accidentally listened to 3 chapters. I thought I was just listening to chapter 3 and 4, but I also listened to chapter 5. Hester, right off the bat, the writing is so easy. I'm really enjoying it. It's so easy to follow. The beginning was not confusing, but it took me a while before I understand that it was a bit of a like prequel to the rest of the story. We got like the building of a banking family and how different people treated the bank differently and how the bank was successful and not successful. And eventually we have one of our main characters called Catherine Vernon, who was kind of the woman who rescued the bank, the family bank. In our current day, Catherine is looking for people to take over. It says that she is 65 in the current day, so she's not actively working in the bank anymore, but she has dedicated her whole life to it. We meet both the like cousins or the men she wants to take over from her or who are like working at the bank right now, but we also meet the wife and the daughter of the man who was her cousin and who kind of ruined the bank. Or was it even her brother? No, I think it was. Yeah, it was her cousin. So it's gonna be interesting. Like, tension is definitely there between the characters. And I can see how this is connected to Jane Austen because we have quite a hyper focus on a few characters who are definitely going to have emotional and complicated relationships with each other. I used Hester for the Jane Austen prompt. So yeah, today I'm just gonna read another 80 pages of A Tale of Two Cities, or I'm going to try to, and then I will have finished A Tale of Two Cities in 2 days. And then my plan was to also read Moonfleet this week, which I'm excited for. I'm having a little bit of historical adventure week, I would guess, with my reads. I'll see you tomorrow. It is day 3 of Victober and I have read one more chapter of Hester because yesterday I accidentally listened to 2 chapters. So in this book I will not talk spoilers, although I think a lot of people will read this book with us. We have this Vernon family and their matriarch in the current day, and the matriarch has set up a bit of a village where all her relatives are allowed to live, and they gossip a lot about her. So I just had a chapter of just a whole lot of gossip from people who are actually benefiting a lot from her. They're still gossiping about her intentions, about I think their own pride a lot by taking her charity in a way. It's a lot of fun. Chapter 6 kind of reminded me of Grandfather by Elizabeth Gaskell, which is one of my favorite Victorian gossipy classics. So I can definitely see the Jane Austen part with more the younger characters, and then also kind of like Emma, maybe by Jane Austen bit, the gossipy bit, but definitely it feels very Cranford for me. And again, I'm really enjoying how easy the writing is, because I don't usually go full-on audiobook with a Victorian classic, but when I read the first 2 chapters of this one on Kindle, or on my Kindle, I felt like easy enough, I can follow this through audio, and I definitely can. So that is really, really great. And yesterday evening I also read a lot of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I think the second half is very action-packed, which I'm enjoying. I definitely see how the plot of this book is very good, especially compared to some of other Dickens's work. I think this plot is much easier to follow and a bit more straightforward. It's a bit more of a classic plot, I would say. But the characters do still feel very surface level, especially our female main character. I had some hopes for her, but I'm not seeing that happening at all. She is there for the plot, and I think most characters are there for the plot. A few are a bit more interesting, like the doctor in this book, who is the father of the female main character. I think is the most interesting character because his character has been through a lot of the page, and we see the effects of those events more than the events themselves. So I feel like his character is a bit more deeper and a bit more well thought out, but the other characters feel very much in service of the plot. Like the older male characters are very interesting and introspective in this book, but then the younger characters, I don't really see who they are beyond the events that are happening to them. So I guess it's easier to read a more plot-focused Charles Dickens. Characters are usually what make the books challenging because there's so many of them and they have so many different motivations. The writing though on a sentence level is so beautiful. I'm still enjoying that incredibly. I think I will end up really enjoying this, but it would never be a 5-star read for me because I do feel so many of the characters aren't really characters. And I am planning to finish this within 2 days. I have a nail appointment later today, which is very necessary because I'm not sure what I did. I think I was doing some DIY stuff and look what happened to my nails. I don't know like how or why. I'm glad they didn't break, but my nails are crazy long right now, and I kind of love that for the Halloween vibe, so I may leave them long but just give them some purple goodness. So I have that later today. So I do want to read a little bit more of A Tale of Two Cities, at least before tonight, because I'm noticing that I'm really enjoying reading these classics just at night with just my great reading light and just the audiobook on, and I'm just diving into it. But reading 100 pages in one evening is a bit much for me, so I do always try to read at least 30 or 40 pages during the day. I have a few things to do today outside of the house, but then it's the weekend and I have Saturday all to myself, so I might make that a bit of a reading day. Yesterday evening I got a little bit carried away with A Tale of Two Cities because the plot is plotting at the end of this book and there are little things I'm kind of guessing but I'm not sure about, and I think the hints are very subtle that when we work towards the reveal in this book you get these hints and then you kind of start guessing what is actually the reveals and everything in this book. I read a little bit more than my standard 100 pages yesterday. I got to a chapter where the next chapter would have a major reveal, so I am now almost finished. This is where I am 409 and the whole book is 442 pages, so I have about 30 pages before I have finished this book. There is this thing, there is a reveal if you've read this at the end, where I feel like quite early in the book there is kind of hints that this would happen in some form or some shape, but you don't really know how. I mean, I think you can guess, and I think if I would reread this I would see the signs quite early on. Still, it hasn't happened yet, but I know what will happen. It's not like, I would say, a plot twisty thing that you would see in a contemporary book where you're like shocked. I don't know if a Victorian reader would have really appreciated a shock without like very clear build-up. I don't think I've ever really seen that in these kind of books where you just get a plot twist out of nowhere. I don't think that's really the Victorian way. I will definitely sit down now and finish the rest of this, and then later today I can listen to my chapters of Hester, yes. And then because I did plan a bit of a reading day today, I might also start Moonfleet, or maybe I will read more of the Victorian adjacent books that I'm reading. Also my nails, I am so happy with them. I told my nail tech that I wanted spooky, I wanted purple, but I also told her about victober. So she gave me, I don't know if you can see, like shapes like these, which remind me a little bit of Victorian like home decor for a bit. She was busy a long time. I didn't mind. I have a great time every time I get my nails done. Like I feel like my thumbs are also a bit vintagey. Every month it's just such a moment of self-care to get my nails done. I was thinking about doing this for years, but I always felt like, would it be worth the money? I can reasonably do them myself, but then I just did it and I enjoy it so much to get it done every month. It's so nice to spend a little bit of time and money every month on something that's not necessary but that makes you feel good every day, and I happily not do other things like buy a lot of clothes because of that. But having said that, I did find a dress in the Joni clothing outlet, and they make some, like, not always, but some vintage inspired clothing, always really good quality. And I got a dress that has like a lot of Victorian vibes, and so I put that in the washing machine right now, but I'll show you once it's like clean and dry. It's more like a dress like a middle class woman would wear maybe, or servants, I don't know, but I just really liked the vibe, and it's like a 2-layer dress, which is so fancy. I will leave the website to Joni's clothing in the description. I will say it's a bit pricey if you buy not from the outlet. It's really like worth it because it's all like organic and cotton and stuff like that, but I usually go for the outlet with the budget that I have. Having said that, their outlet's also great. So little recommendation for you if you're looking for clothing that like is for a longer period. Not at all sponsored, I wish, but yeah, just a tip. Wow, what an ending. Yeah, I don't know, it's a beautiful book, I guess. Gosh. It is day number 6 of Victober. I started making some notes with a very messy journal that I just put full of stickers with no feel for aesthetics at all, which I'm loving. But I have a little base where I make notes of all the empire spotting, which is Ross's prompt. Let's start with the book I recently finished, which is A Tale of Two Cities. Overall, I really enjoyed this. There are two things that I saw with empire spotting in this book. You would think there's more in a book that is set in two different countries. One is more general theme in this book, and that is that it's between the conflict between England and France, which of course had to do with power outside, especially in Africa as well. That conflict between them, the wars were about power and them both wanting to have the biggest empire. And then there was a smaller detail, which is that one of the French characters was drinking chocolate, which of course came from Africa, so that's also part of that conflict. But other than that, I didn't like food-wise, clothes-wise, there weren't a lot of details discussed, so of course there were clothes discussed, and if you've read this book, there's one very important scene surrounding clothes. They didn't really discuss the materials, so I cannot really say, oh, that's like silk or cotton and it's tied to those parts of the empire. But Ross made a video about how to empire spot. Basically, I would recommend going to Ross's channel and watch that video if you want a little bit more guidance on empire spotting. I found that video very, very helpful. And Ross herself as well, because she mentioned that we were talking about empire spotting during the reading sprint, and she said when it comes to A Tale of Two Cities, just a general conflict that is the main plot line of this book. Alright, so I think I talked to you a lot about what this book is already about, but I'll do some things that I liked and some things that I didn't like. So just starting with the negative. Romance is something that drives this plot forward, not completely, but it's a part of what drives the plot, and I just did not find it believable. And that ties into the other thing I didn't like about this book, and that's the main character Lucy, which is such a typical badly written woman. Such a woman raised by a man that I found it annoying. She doesn't have her own will. Her motivations for her actions are never discussed on the page, and all the male characters are in love with her or have a certain admiration for her, while we never get to know why she has such great qualities through her own perspective or through her own voice. It's all, she is so amazing because she's loyal and silent. Have you ever met a woman like that? No, you have not. The believability of both the romance plot device didn't work for that, because I couldn't see why the love was strong or existed, because Lucy wasn't a person or a character to me. So those two things didn't work for me in this book. Having said that, all the other things did really work very well for me in this book. I found this book politically interesting because it looks very much at the subjectivity of what is right and what is wrong, and imprisonment is a big part of that in this book as well. A lot of characters are imprisoned in different parts in time in this book, and whether or not that is just has so much to do with politics. Some other storylines as well that I cannot really discuss without spoilers also have to do with right and wrong and the ethics of an existing law, which I found very interesting. And I think it's one of the strongest parts of this book. Another really strong part is the general plot. It's very engaging. I would say this book is heavily plot based, and it's such a great motivator to keep on reading. I had a great time just reading this book, wanting to pick it up all the time, which I don't think I've ever experienced with a Charles Dickens book before. There are some reveals in this book that were just great. I think I discussed it in the last clip that I saw some things coming, but still I thought it was just so well done, and it makes, I think, for a great reread when you can see some little hints towards those reveals. So having complained about Lucy and also kind of her love interests, or one of her love interests, I would say that there were other characters in this book that were really complex, and again tied to that imprisonment. Mental health is really well discussed in this book as far as I can see, of course. I think when it comes to like mental health, Dr. Manette and Sydney Carton are both such complex and interesting characters. Mostly Dr. Manette because he has different phases in which his mental health is better and is worse, and it's all tied together to the other characters. Found very interesting. Sydney Carton is, I think, complex, but also a character that suffers from a lot of different mental health issues, substance abuse, depression, and I feel like his storyline is very interesting, and I've seen some bits of adaptations, and I think Sydney Carton has a much bigger part in an adaptation than he does in the book, because he's very much the side character in this book, but I feel like in adaptations he is often at the front page of the poster of a series. And like, I get it because he's an amazing character, but it doesn't really fit with how Dickens wrote the story, but I do very much understand it. Also think the French characters were very interesting. We had the Marquise, who is a very important character when we look at right and wrong, and then we had Mr. and Mrs. Defarge, which again were very important for looking at things from a different perspective, to understand the subjectivity of the laws. Found both of them really interesting. Mrs. Defarge is the only interesting female character in this book whatsoever. I really enjoyed her. Yeah, there's a lot of mystic and mystery around her. Right off the bat, we have Lucy, who is fair and blonde, and then we have Mrs. Defarge, who is described as managing with dark hair. And I'm like, that's such a cheap Victorian thing. Always annoying. Like why? Why? But Mrs. Defarge was way more interesting than Lucy in the way that she's written. That begs the question to me a little bit, could Charles Dickens only think of an interesting woman in a villainous context for this book? Like, not in general, like when we look at Our Mutual Friends, it's completely different. I feel like in Great Expectations I also felt a little bit like that. So, you know, Charles Dickens and women, like if you look at his personal life, it's understandable, but let's just look at his work. I'm going to end up giving this 4 stars. You know, both good and bad, but generally I had a wonderful reading experience. I would highly recommend this book, even if you don't necessarily love Charles Dickens, which is an affliction I suffer from. This I think anyone will love. It's a very easy book to really enjoy and love. Currently I am on chapter 11 of Hester. Yeah, I think I'm right up to date. I still have today's chapters to listen to. I wasn't able to get the physical copy for a long time, but then I ordered it on Amazon, which I don't like to do, but I ordered it on Amazon and it said will be shipped within 7 months. It's like, you know, let's just try. I can always cancel it if it actually takes 7 months. I'm getting it today though. Only took a week, but I really did want a physical copy of Hester because it's a group read for a year of Victober. I'm a host. It's just a special memory I want on my bookshelves. But the audiobook's great. I would highly recommend it. This book has great character development. There's so much space and time made for it. Hester keeps getting older and older, and the further you get into the book. And her rift between her personality and her mother's is becoming very prevalent, but at the same time she's growing up and you could say lose some of her childish rebellion and accepting more her society, adjusting her ambitions to that society. But at the same time I do feel this fire in Hester, and I feel like this complacency that she has now developed in her late teens definitely not going to last. But you can still see that she enjoys the company of people that have a little bit more to say versus their status. I do believe, like in the description of the book, there's supposed to be a sort of kind of forced romance. I do see one male character who is completely in the pocket of Mrs. Vernon. Can see how we're going to get a lot of conflict with that. I'm already enjoying. I definitely see the Jane Austen vibes in this book, and it's great. It's so wonderful. I was thinking, why is this author not someone who we fastly read from still, like George Eliot and Charles Dickens? Maybe it's the lack of purple prose or of very impressive writing on a sentence level. I really enjoy it because it's so easy to understand what is happening, so easy to follow. Maybe we really like the idea that authors used to write very complicated sentences and used to write in a way that was difficult for us to understand now, and when an author writes a little bit more simply because her voice feels very modern, we are less impressed. I'm not really sure, but like story-wise, this feels like the kind of book that should have been very much preserved in our current day. And I didn't know who Margaret Oliphant was before BookTube. I had no idea, but I'm glad I'm reading it now. So yes, I'm still having a good time. Hi Noortjes. Hi sweetie. Oh, and I started my next book, which is Moonfleet by J. Mead Faulkner. Talking about purple prose and something that's difficult to follow. This is supposed to be a children's book, but I'm having a difficult time following this because the writing on the sentence level is difficult, especially for a children's book. So we follow a young boy. He was 15. He's an orphan. He is called John Trenchard. And he lives with his aunt who is very strict, and he starts to have some fantasies and ideas about blackbeards and pirateering, and he visits this cemetery that you would think can see on the front. And the first time he does so, he meets the man who makes the headstones and the graves, and they are burying another 15-year-old boy, I believe called David. So it starts out quite grim. Then John starts to fantasize about what it would be like to have a life outside of Moonfleet, and he somehow thinks that Blackbeard is calling for him, I believe. I'm very curious where this is going to go. I am on page 42, and yesterday I had a terrible migraine, so that day we're not gonna count page count wise, but I would like to get to page 158, so I need to read a little over 100 pages of this today and still more pages of Hester. I don't know if that's gonna happen today, but I would like to keep on track because I convinced Mary from Mary Among Stories to read the Wilkie Collins book, The Woman in White, with me in 1 week, in the last week of October, which is 700 pages. So I would like to be on track before I start that, because I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's a book that's been on both of our TBRs for a while, and just reading that right before Halloween seems perfect. I think my migraine is gone now, kind of, but boy has a really bad cold. Sometimes I escape it when he has a cold, but usually not. Usually when you live together, everyone gets the cold, don't they? I do have reading sprints planned. I hope I won't have to cancel that when I also get sick. But I can feel that I'm getting sick as well. Yeah, it might be a week of audiobooks for me, but I would like to keep on filming this vlog and make more vlogs and do all the exciting things I've been thinking of. I've like ordered some things from our crafts, so please. Yeah, I will see you hopefully tomorrow when I have much more to say on Moonfleet. It is day 7 of Victober, so the last day of the first week. I have read 2/3 of Moonfleet by Jamie Faulkner, and I may be a little bit disappointed with this book. So while I like certain events that are happening, I think they're quite engaging and adventurous, and I think it will speak to the imagination of a lot of children. Overall, the way the novel is woven together and written, it just doesn't really work for me. There are a lot of random gaps in between events, and I don't feel like the events are woven together in a way that makes a lot of sense, and the writing is to me overly complicated. I can see that maybe people would enjoy this as children or to read this together with a child. Just as a novel, it doesn't really do it for me. There are a few funny non-feminist sentences in this book. I didn't know I would say that, but it's funny. Oh, this boy at one point says, "And had I been a woman or a girl, I think I should have swooned. But being only a boy and not knowing how to swoon did the next best thing." And then again, "It was a sight to stare any man, and would have made me swoon perhaps. But there was no time," because boys have no time to swoon apparently. And then later they're like in an action-packed scene and one man says to another, "There's no time to play the woman. Another minute of this and we are lost." What does playing the woman mean? Like that he would swoon? To me, okay, I think it's funny, but it's so misplaced in a children's book, because you would read this to girls too, right? And then you would teach children that swooning and not making things work is womanly. Like, I know it's Victorian, but still. And I also annotated a few themes. Blackbeard is a big theme in this book, and I find it a little bit funny how there are like such clear metaphors into what he is, like his beard himself. There's some scripture involved with Blackbeard, and I think it's gonna have a lot of meaning for the main character. The scripture is in the book, but I don't necessarily really understand it, but I think it's gonna be a bit of a morality part of this book. But yeah, I'm not that convinced. I think it will be a 3-star, but I will finish it today. Hester is my favorite read of Victober so far. The conflict between all the female main characters is so interesting, so enjoyable to read, and you can just feel the tension brewing, and you can feel that all these women are going to go through a character development and they're going to change, especially Hester, of course, because she's quite young at the beginning of the book, but also her mother, and I do think Hester will also change. Mrs. Vernon, or is it Miss Vernon? Because she never married, I'm not sure. But yeah, Hester is a banger so far. I'm really enjoying it. I also still need to listen to my chapters of Hester today. I did mention Joni clothing. This is also from their outlet. Love it. Just mentioning it real quick. I have not been watching a lot yet, but I have watched 2 episodes of Middlemarch, which I think there's only one series. I think it's from the 90s. It's definitely very old. It looks very old when you're watching it, and it's a bit slow. It's a bit dull. The story of Middlemarch is great, but without George Eliot's beautiful writing, I'm not sure it's that engaging. We have met Dorothea and Will, and I don't know if they were the driving force for me while reading the book, but they're definitely the driving force of this series. And I'm enjoying seeing those actors act together because I think they are really well matched. But the other characters I find a bit dull, so this is not binge worthy to me so far. But I will talk to you a little bit more about that series hopefully next week once I have finished watching it. Thank you so much for watching this vlog. I hope you had a good time, and I hope to see you next week, where I will also do some Victorian things. I think I'm gonna be sewing. So if you're curious for that, then subscribe, like, do all the YouTubey things, and I will see you next week. Doei!